the book discusses a lot of Baltimore history. Part of it is the housing history, and points out that at the time of the Civil War, Baltimore had the largest free black population of any city in the country. Half of the people in Baltimore who were black were slaves, half were free blacks. And Baltimore's black population was pretty much scattered throughout the city, often in back alley streets, but not centralized. And then the book describes how...
And this is 1900s, early 1900s.
Right. How beginning around 1910 or so, the concentrations began, and how the whites started to be concerned about what they call the Negro invasion, and they began passing laws to restrict the criminal laws, to restrict the housing options of blacks. Laws were passed that made it a crime for a black to move into a block that was predominantly white. These laws were adopted by other cities around the country. In fact, they were called in other cities the Baltimore Law, because Baltimore was the first city to adopt such laws, until they were ultimately held unconstitutional in a case called Buchanan and Worley out of Louisville. So I discussed that in the book.
Is that what makes Baltimore considered the most segregated city in America?
I don't know whether it is the most segregated city. I mean, I don't have a statistic that tells me.
But you just said it was a national leader.
In that law that attempted to use the criminal law to enforce and to create racial housing segregation, started in Maryland, and it was adopted into some other cities.
What impact did this have on the people, you think?
Well, the impact was that Baltimore's black population ended up hemmed into tight, congested areas, and with all of the social ills, including health ills, that followed from that. That's part of what I cover. Then another thing that is covered in this book is Baltimore's history, with Maryland's history with respect to the electorate. The repeated efforts 3 times to change the Maryland Constitution to disenfranchise blacks. All 3 efforts defeated by a combination of black voters, Republicans who relied upon the blacks the party of Lincoln for votes, and certain immigrant groups that were threatened by the grandfather clauses. They thought they couldn't pass muster on these laws that said you could vote if your grandfather voted at a certain time. Well, these were groups that had just come in from Europe, and so those 3 efforts, named for their sponsors, the Poe, Diggs, and Strauss amendments to the Maryland Constitution, are described in the book.